Hi everyone, it's Emma here, and today I'm answering the question, how can I get rid of a UTI fast? So there are a number of scenarios where you might want to treat a urinary tract infection particularly fast. So last week I spoke a bit about how and when you were able to treat a UTI from home, but there might be some instances where you actually just want to treat the symptoms very, very quickly. So one scenario might be if you suspect you have an upper UTI. So this is when the infection starts to go towards the kidneys. So some red flag symptoms might include back pain, but also if you've got a fever, any vomiting, diarrhea, any other symptoms that suggest that infection is travelling higher up the urinary tract and or more systemically, then we would definitely want to get that treated very, very quickly. So this is why my first tip is to visit your pharmacy. There, your pharmacist could talk through the options depending on your symptoms. Perhaps a dose of antibiotics might be necessary in some cases. Your pharmacist will explain that, but we would hope to only take antibiotics if it was definitely necessary, and then also to follow the instructions. So for example, to complete a dose if a course is required. So that's just my first point, because sometimes speed is important depending on the symptoms and the type of infection, so it's always good to be cautious. But number 2 on my list, if the infection is likely to be able to be treated from home and or with home or herbal remedies, then of course that would be our go-to. So you could also pick up some Uva-ursi Echinacea at your pharmacy as well. So these are licensed herbal drops for treating the symptoms of cystitis or UTIs. So this would be a good alternative to something like the antibiotics if that was suitable. So you can take these drops, 15 drops, up to 5 times daily, to help ward off the symptoms, the urinary complaints, urinary symptoms relating to UTIs or cystitis. Number 3 on my list is to drink plenty of water. So we would hope that people would be doing this anyway, but of course it can be something that can slip our minds, or perhaps recently, depending on what's going on, maybe you haven't been keeping up with your water as much as you would like to, but that's something to definitely introduce as quickly as possible. So up to 2 litres of water at least a day if you've got an active infection, potentially even slightly more if that infection is active. And just as our general advice, I would say to try and separate it slightly from your meals, just to protect your lovely gastric juices. Number 4, we're up in our water, but we want to avoid irritants. So irritants can include alcohol, caffeine and refined sugar. Alcohol and caffeine in particular can irritate the lining of the urinary tract. So those would be classed as irritants that we would want to limit straight away if you had an active infection. Refined sugar is more directly going to impact the bad bacteria. So the UTI has been caused by bad bacteria, and sources of refined sugars can potentially feed that bacteria. So those would be one to watch. When it comes to your refined sugar, it can be found in lots of your obvious choices, your sweet treats, your fizzy juice, sweetened drinks, but it can actually be hidden in lots of extras as well, such as savoury, processed and packaged goods, ready meals, tomato sauces, things like that. So that's just one to consider. Again, cutting straight away if you have a current infection you're keen to get rid of. The other one on my list, number 5, is to introduce cranberries. So cranberries in their whole form, although whole form of fruit would be recommended, cranberries are very, very tart. So it's not something that we would tend to eat just in their whole form. So the next obvious choice would be cranberry juice. And then we just want to be conscious of that rule of having no refined sugar, so a really good quality juice. So something like the Biota Mountain Cranberry juice has no refined sugar added to it there, so all good quality ingredients in there. So cranberry has been used traditionally to help ward off the symptoms of UTI and to help prevent the bacteria sticking to the inside of your urinary tract. So that would definitely be a liquid to include alongside your water. But again, we do want to make sure you've got that minimum water intake, about 2 litres, and then just top up with little bits of cranberry juice. We wouldn't need huge amounts of the cranberry, definitely all about the water. Next on my list is to rest. So again, this is something that we would want you to probably put into place quite quickly. And this is all relating back to your immune system. So I've spoken about this before, but we're really relying on your immune system to not only detect that initial infection quickly, but also to target it and try and manage the infection. So that is partly a big part of your recovery, is supporting your immune system. So rest is an important part of that. If we do it too much too soon, the infection could end up lasting longer, and we could actually suffer for it. So if we are doing too much physically, then your immune system doesn't have enough resources, enough time and energy to really hone in on any infections. So rest is an absolute must, especially in those early days when the infection is most active. Although even beyond that, if we don't recover well from an infection, we could be more likely to experience recurrent infections. So it's just being aware of this and to help look after yourself during that time. This also leads me on to my next point, which is vitamin C. Vitamin C is very, very good for supporting that recovery process. Vitamin C is an antioxidant, which means it helps to protect your cells, and your cells lining your urinary tract are no exception. If we can help to protect, first of all, support the recovery and then help to protect these cells, you're less likely to fall victim to recurrent infections. So vitamin C is definitely one to try and up if you have a current infection and or if you're experiencing recurrent infections. Vitamin C is found in lots of lovely fresh foods, primarily your fresh fruit and vegetables. Your citrus fruit is well known for being high in vitamin C, but not forgetting your lovely vegetables, which will also be slightly lower in sugar, although your fruits are natural sugars bound in a lovely matrix full of lovely phytonutrients and fibres and things, so they don't tend to be so problematic anyway. But vegetables are a fantastic source of vitamin C. Then if you're keen to top up just a little bit more, again, if you have something like an active infection and you're particularly keen to support yourself, something like our Nature C would be a good one to add in at this time. This is the one for kids. I've just got this to hand to show you, but we've got a Nature C for everyone. It's actually the same ingredient, and the vitamin C is made from lovely whole fruits, acerola cherry for one of the highest sources of vitamin C. So that just would be one that we might want to include, and I will put a link to in the description to these products that I'm mentioning as well. Number 8, I just want to wrap up by touching on probiotics. So probiotics aren't a product that we have in our range, but I mentioned antibiotics at the start, so probiotics would also be one to consider if you've been put on a course of antibiotics, to try and take a course of probiotics as well. There are probiotics out there which are specifically tailored for people who are on antibiotics. So as much as antibiotics can in some cases be effective at targeting the root of the infection, the bad bacteria, unfortunately antibiotics can risk also damaging our good bacteria, and that's what something like the probiotics would help to replenish and just keep those good bacteria well, as again they're going to help you in the future and protect you against any recurrent infections, any secondary infections as well. So fingers crossed that helps. That list helps there if you're trying to get rid of a UTI quickly. As always, please do leave any comments or questions below and we'll get back to you. And please do subscribe to our Evolgo YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so you will be notified of any new videos. Thanks.